about the existence of God. However, I'm still looking more, waiting to hear evidence of your doctrine of humanism.
Well, you see, Dr. Gregg, with all due respect, didn't give us evidence. He gave us hearsay claims, which are supposed to overcome the supernatural. And what I did was the evidence I gave was the evidence that we use to determine everything else in our lives. The same evidence where through our sensory perceptions and scientific investigation and common understanding we come to know that something is what it is. The same evidence that lets you know that the ocean is over there and the mountain is over here, or that the sun is out, or that it's raining. But you see, what Dr. Gregg is trying to say is that with no direct evidence, we are supposed to believe something entirely supernatural, which is not repeatable or testable today. Dr. Gregg has never said, well, let me take you down to this morgue and I'll show you 10 people who resurrect, and you'll see them float up into heaven to show that it's possible. So all he has done essentially is to show us something based on blind faith that happened 2,000 years ago with no direct proof.
Mr. Tabash, have you ever seen an atom?
I'm sorry, we're going to have to just limit you to one question.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Well, I think you recognized, if you were listening carefully to the debate, that that's not at all what I did. We had three arguments for the existence of God tonight. One from evil, one from cosmological argument, and one from contingency. And if you're going to deny the conclusion of those arguments, you've got to deny one of the premises, otherwise the conclusion follows logically. On the contrary, Eddie couldn't give an argument, a scientific argument for atheism or humanism, because humanism is a value judgment. It's a value judgment about the intrinsic worth of human beings. And you can't prove value judgments by scientific evidence. So that his position is internally self-contradictory. You can't find moral values in a test tube. There cannot be scientific evidence for a value judgment. And thus, humanism is internally self-contradictory. It says only believe what you can prove by scientific evidence, but then in itself is a belief in a value judgment about human beings not based on scientific evidence. So it's internally incoherent.
You have a question for Dr. Gregg?
Yes, Dr. Gregg, we are told that the Judeo-Christian God is a spirit, and we are made in his image. Then why aren't we all invisible?
Well, I think when it says that we're made in the image of God, this means, for one thing, that man is God's representative on earth. As God is sovereign over the universe, so God has placed man on earth to be the steward and the caretaker for this earth. In a more philosophical sense, I think it means that we're created in God's image in the sense that we are persons. And in that sense, we stand apart from all the rest of creation, in that we are self-conscious persons endowed with intellect, emotions, and will, and thus can have a personal relationship with God. So I think that's what's meant when it talks about being created in the personal image of God. And that is, by the way, why we have intrinsic moral value as human beings. We're not just animals.
Well, certainly if we're made in the image of God, and God is an incorporeal being, and God doesn't have a physical mind, then a physical brain, we shouldn't have to have physical brains in order to have consciousness. So I think that's a very serious problem. Now, if God, of course, is the focal point of these moral values, you've got a pretty vicious God. In the book of Numbers, in the Bible, he orders somebody killed just for picking up sticks on the Sabbath. God orders two homosexuals who share consensual love with each other to be put to death. I don't want to have that kind of moral values imposed on me by such a bloodthirsty creature. Also, Dr. Gregg still hasn't answered why these great evidentiary supernatural events occurred thousands of years ago, but we moderns don't get a chance to see them today. All his responses look within. Well, I've looked within, and I've looked within, and I don't get the same thing Dr. Gregg does. Why is his introspection superior to my introspection? Why is his internal message of God better than my internal message that there is no supernatural being?
Do you have a question for Mr. Tabash?
Yes, I do. First I have a statement, and then I have a question. My statement...
could you just jump in? No question.
Go real quick. I think that this is an issue, a lot of it, on the morality issue, is relativism. And the problem that we're dealing with here is whose morality we're placing ourselves up against. If there is an eternal God who is completely moral and completely correct, then, according to Isaiah 64, our righteousness is as filthy rags. or literally translated administration rags. So my question for you is that sometimes whenever we're up against something we don't understand and we're not as good as, we become afraid. And this is a very personal question, for introspection or for sharing. Are you afraid of God? Are you afraid of hell? Are you afraid of your own analysis? Because we all have it.
I'm not afraid of God, I'm not afraid of hell, because these things are so preposterous I don't believe they exist. Now, if God wants me to believe in Him, I think He owes me more. If God says, you know what, Eddie, I'm going to send you to the barbecue room for all eternity, unless you believe in me, He's got to give me evidence. So far, I've seen God say things like the man should rule over the woman. Well, let's say the woman is more intelligent. Genesis 3:16 doesn't allow for that. In the book of Thessalonians, it says that the woman shouldn't speak in the church but ask her husband. So you have the Bible imposing all of these inferiorities on women, and there's no external justification for claiming that women should be subordinate to men. And then you have God ordering these people to be killed, and with these ridiculous laws, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. So if some poor woman is practicing some witchcraft, you're supposed to take her out and execute her. I mean, this is a bloodthirsty God, and then He caps it off by sending good people to hell forever. I don't want to know this creature. He is a demon. Thank you.
Well, I think that answer made it evident exactly what it implies, that he doesn't want this kind of God. He doesn't want to believe in this sort of God. So it's not a matter for, I think, Eddie, of evidence and argument. It's a matter of the will. That this is a God which he simply wants nothing to do. And God will say to you, if that is your desire, all right, thy will be done. As I said, in one sense, I don't believe God sends anybody to hell. God wants every person to be saved, and He tries to draw every person to Himself and to save every person. And the only reason people are lost is because they don't want anything to do with God and they reject Him. So really, hell is a human creation. It's not something that God wants.
Do you have a question for Dr. Craig?
I'll ask a question to Dr. Craig. Dr. Craig, you said without a God we have no special status over the other animals. Wouldn't you agree that if in fact no God exists, that the tenets and methods of humanism are a nonetheless noble pursuit in lieu of any meaning derived from outside ourselves?
Yes, I would agree that the tenets and the goals of humanism are noble pursuits. And what I'm doing tonight is I'm not arguing against those goals or those desires. On the contrary, what I want to offer you is a foundation for those desires. We share the same beliefs, and in one sense, we believe in the intrinsic dignity of human beings, in intrinsic human rights, in the fellowship of humanity. But what I'm arguing is that apart from a transcendent foundation of those, we have no basis for criticizing the National Socialist Germany or the apartheid South Africana or the genocide that goes on in Cambodia or in Bosnia. So it's not the pursuits and the goals of humanism that I disagree with. I agree with those, but I'm saying we need to have a foundation in our philosophy of life for affirming those values that we commonly hold dear.
Well, Dr. Craig said a few minutes ago that God tries to draw every person to Himself. All I can say is, boy, is this one awkward God. So He puts my mother through Auschwitz, have her go through these horrible experiences, which kills her ability to have any enjoyment in life. She thinks that all religion is ludicrous. And then the moment she dies, God says, sister, you thought Auschwitz was tough? Wait till you see where I'm sending you now. I mean, this is certainly something which I think we have a right to disbelieve in. And if it is true that God is that way, then He owes us evidence, because He owes us some evidentiary proof before sending us to the grill room forever. Let God, for instance, turn Pacific Coast Highway to the road to Damascus and have it big, as I drive up here in Malibu, a big sunlight or whatever appear, and say, Eddie, why dost thou reject me? Come unto me. Something which to me would give me the same inner experience as Dr. Craig. So why does God single Dr. Craig out for those inner experiences, but leaves me out of it? Why is He partisan to Dr. Craig and not to me? I want those experiences. I challenge Him. God, listen to me. Show yourself.